Alright guys, Hayzink here, welcome back to the channel for another Street Fighter Duel video. And you know what, I decided to do a little bit of digging, looking into like what's actually happening here and why Guile is bugged, you know. And to be honest with you, it is so goddamn simple that I do not understand how they have managed to have such a simple oversight, and it is so obvious what's actually going on, and the key to fixing it is extremely easy as well. So the reason I'm putting out this video is because we know TOPJOY like to take forever to actually do anything. They like to wait until they've had pile upon pile of bug reports detailing what's actually going on. They try and replicate the bug and all the rest of it. Well, this one is so basic that I honestly do not know if they understand anything about coding, okay? So you guys will probably be aware, at least some of you anyway, that coding basically works in such a way that A equals B, if B then move to C kind of thing, right? Easy way to put that is every action has a reaction or a different outcome within a system, right? So for example, if you are playing your favourite RPG and you've got two choices, okay? You choose choice A, it'll lead to event B. If you choose choice B, it'll lead to event D, whatever, right? When it comes to the game and coding, they've got like a string of code that will be exceptions, etc. If you go here, move to here, then do this. That's essentially what coding is, right? When you boil it down. So what's basically happening here, and you can actually see this playing out in a minute, is they have basically given Guile a trigger on his C3, right? In fact, to make this a little bit easier, let's look at Guile again before I run this video. Right, so if you look at Guile's trigger, which is a C3, if you look at how it's actually functions, how it actions, what it is, this is basically a passive trigger, right? This is the type of trigger you would normally get up here, okay? This is normally, that type of trigger is reserved to this sort of a slot, okay? Now it's very easy to see that if we actually come out of here and you go and look at a unit like, for example, Ibuki, skill, this type of trigger here, okay? So if we look here, blah 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 blah, you do that, right? Every time you gain a certain number of stacks, you will go ahead and carry out the action. That type of trigger is normally what you find in a passive slot, okay? However, for some reason, with Guile, they've decided, instead of giving him his trigger as a passive, it's going to be a C3, okay? Now, if you go and look at all the other kind of C3 characters, they all function in a different way, where if they've got a trigger on their C3, it functions based on usually the action that happens before it, okay? I.e., or at the same time, when another character triggers their C3, this unit will do this. When another character triggers their C2, this unit will do this, etc. so on and so forth, right? This doesn't work that way. This isn't a trigger that's triggered by your combo set or your combo chain, okay? So basically, we'll now go back to the video and I'll kind of talk you through what it pretty much is happening here, okay? So let's look at this battle here. This was actually quite hard to get this footage because you're in a trial. There's not a lot I can actually do to make things a bit easier for like surviving and stuff like that, but to test out my theory, we had to build up 2 combo stacks before being able to start the combo, okay? So I am going to be pausing this to kind of show you what we're talking about here, okay? So we're going to build up our 2 stacks of combo meter, making sure that we don't die. And now I've moved it back into auto mode, okay, which is obviously where the issue is happening. So if we go here, you'll see Guile uses his super, okay, which is fine, that's what we were expecting. We'll go into the C1, Blanca won't do C2. Now watch here, right, okay, so Guile has literally just done his super and he is currently in the middle of his animations for the super, okay. The second that super animation finished, like the very split second that super animation finished, it launched a super combo, okay? You guys all seen that? So just to go back again, just to like reiterate exactly what happened there, watch it again. Guile does his super, pops his trigger, which is what's preventing the C2 from happening, and immediately he does his super, okay? This is so simple. Basically, what they've done is they have an algorithm or AI in place where super on auto, super leads to C1, leads to C2, leads to C3. Okay, simple as that. Super leads to C1, leads to C2, leads to C3. Clearly what's happening here is when Guile triggers, because his trigger is classed as a C3, okay, the AI, the game, hasn't got an exception built in. It hasn't got an exception built into the programming where it goes, okay, I've done this, now I can go back and do a C2, because that's not how it's programmed. It's programmed that it goes super, C1, C2, C3, okay? So instead, what it actually does, and you see it there, is after Guile does his C3 trigger, it immediately will use the available super. It will go straight back to super, because that is what they've programmed. They've programmed the code to be super, C1, C2, C3, and if there's a super available, loop. So basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You got it? Very simple. So what's basically happening is the AI, in essence, is seeing that it's done a C3 because Guile has been stupidly programmed as having a C3 that is a passive trigger, which is what it is, and it has no avenue to look back the way. The AI doesn't know it can look back the way. Now, the reason it works in manual is because we have a brain in our heads, and after the trigger has taken place, we know that we can hit the C2, and then we know that we can hit the C3. So we can just do that. We can hit super, C1, C2, C3. It doesn't matter that Guile's popped his passive, because we know that's his passive, his trigger, and we can just continue on. Whereas they have not programmed in an exception into the code that allows the game to realise that his C3 is working independently of the rest of the team. So it doesn't know that a C2 can follow a C3, okay? This might be confusing to some of you, but putting it simply, the game thinks it's already done its C3, so why would it do the C2? That's essentially what is happening with the AI here. They have literally not programmed in an exception, which is, after this, go and do this. It's as simple as that. That's literally all they need to do, okay? So again, the sequence in the game is usually 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? What's happening is, the game is going 1, 2, then Guile's proccing his trigger, it's jumping from 2 to 4, but then the game doesn't know it can go back and do step 3. Remember? Super, C1, C2, C3, okay? What's happening here is it's basically missing out that, and it's going super, C1, it thinks it's done its C3 because of how they've programmed Guile, and it has never had any function built into it where it can, on auto, go back and do the C2. So that's what they need to do. They need to actually add in an exception. This should not be difficult. This should not be difficult to do, okay? Maybe it will be difficult because of how the actual core of the game is coded, but if that is the case, then they should not have made his C3 a trigger like this. It should have been his C3 will trigger after another unit does their C2 or whatever. But in essence, what they've done is they've taken a trigger skill that would normally be reserved for the unit's passive, okay? So it's not tied to any combo, C1, C2, C3, whatever. And they've literally taken that, stuck it on as a C3. And this is how we now have a problem, because the game does not know it can go back the way and implement that outstanding C2 that's just sitting there ticking down with nothing to do. It thinks it's completed the combo chain already, because there's nothing baked into the game that allows it to understand the concept. It's gone super, C1, C3, back to C2, then C3. That's not built in. It basically thinks that Guile is completing the combo chain, and that's why it's killing your combo. So, pretty straightforward explanation. Hopefully they can fix it. It shouldn't take half a year, because if I can figure out what's happening with it in 5 minutes, then how can they not? So let's see what happens. Let's see how long it takes them to actually fix this. Actual schoolboy stuff, like proper schoolboy stuff. 5 minutes of testing, they would have seen this and they would have been able to deal with it. But lo and behold, we have another bugged unit. Anyway, I've been Hayzink. Peace!